Oh my god, it's really him. Even before I turned around, I was sure that those shrill teenage voices were talking about me. I just couldn't understand why. I wasn't famous. I'd never done anything important in my life. And it had been a long time since I'd been in high school myself. The three girls were leaning over the glass barrier on the second floor of the mall, pointing at me with their hands over their mouths like they'd seen a celebrity. When they realized that I'd spotted them, they ran giggling into the crowd, leaving me with an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. What was that all about? The sense of wrongness I felt only deepened as I walked into the store that I'd come to the mall to visit. Maybe it was just lingering discomfort from what had just happened, but I could have sworn I felt eyes on the back of my neck as I walked down the aisles. Some of the other customers were staring too. I was sure of it. And that wasn't all. Once my eyes had adjusted to the dim light inside the store, I realized that there was a chubby guy in dark clothing standing near the back exit of the store, recording me. "Hey!" I shouted, but he was already gone, disappearing through the access door into the guts of the mall. I reminded myself that I was here to buy a teddy bear for my 4-year-old niece, not to chase some weirdo through a restricted area, and let him go. "You alright?" the woman at the cash register asked when she saw my face. "Yeah, it's just..." I waved my hand vaguely. "Oh yeah, I getcha. All the crazies come out of the woodwork this time of year. Before you came in, I had to break up 2 grown men who were fighting over a stuffed alligator. You believe that?" I shook my head. Ordinarily, I avoided the mall like the plague at this time of year. The crowds and repetitive holiday music got on my nerves. But I had promised my niece that I'd get her a blue teddy bear from this specific store. Why she wanted that specific gift was a mystery to me. But toddlers aren't known for their logic. The cashier scanned my card, frowned, then scanned it again. "Says it's blocked," she grunted, and handed my plastic back to me with a suspicious look. "There's some ATMs on the second floor. If you're able to withdraw cash, that is." Her judgmental glare told me exactly what she thought of people whose cards got declined, and people who wasted her time. As I fought my way through the sea of holiday shoppers, a preteen kid ran up to me and tossed a styrofoam cup of hot chocolate onto my chest. "Did you get that?" he yelled over his shoulder at his friend, who snapped a photo and nodded. The pair of them were gone before I had time to get a good look at their faces, much less try to stop them. Wondering what the hell was wrong with people, I wiped off my ruined sweater and hurried over to the ATMs. The glowing blue screen in front of me soon confirmed my worst fears. I was locked out of all of my accounts. And not just banking stuff either. I couldn't access my email or even social media. Everything was blocked. It was like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Without those little lines of code, who was I, really? Trying to shake off that gut-wrenching feeling, I pulled out my phone to contact my bank. But I was already receiving another call. I picked up immediately, only to hear a mechanical-sounding automated message. "Congratulations! You've been selected." There was something disturbing about that voice, but I had already hung up by the time I realized what it was. Another call was coming in. This number was slightly different from the first, but when I answered it, there was no mistaking it. I was listening to my own voice. Sure, the words were eerily slow and the pronunciation was off, but I was definitely listening to myself. "Not very nice of you to hang up on me like that, Aiden. Not when I've got something so special to tell you." I sputtered, fumbling for a reply. The whole situation was just too strange. Who is this? Who am I talking to? Why, this is everyone, Aiden. Everyone who has a vested interest in seeing what you'll do next. First, though, we think you ought to change shirts. That sticky hot chocolate must be uncomfortable. And besides, yellow isn't really your color. Whoever I was talking to could see what I was wearing, which meant they could see me. My eyes darted from face to face, scanning the crowd. There's no one to look for, Aiden. I'm everywhere. And see that outlet store in front of you, Aiden? We'd like you to go in and get yourself a new holiday sweater. Oh, and since your cards are blocked, you'll have to steal it. Well, go ahead. We're waiting. I hung up. Of course, they called back again. And again. And again. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my pocket. My heart was pounding. What the hell was going on here? The police, that was it. I just had to talk to the police to let them know I was being harassed and stalked, but by who? Had I made any enemies lately? There was Tim, the IT guy from work, who had never seemed to like me very much. He knew who I was and maybe even had access to sound bites of my voice. But would Tim really go this far just to mess with me? I wandered in a daze past giant ornaments and chlorinated fountains full of pocket change, barely aware of where I was going, until a guy with a goatee stopped dead in front of me and stuck out his hand, jabbing a blindingly bright screen into my face. "It's, for you." He sounded as confused as I was. "Somebody called me and he said he needs to talk to the guy in the yellow shirt with a hot chocolate stain. That's you, right? It's something about somebody named Kimmy." My blood ran cold. Kimmy was my mother's nickname. People shoved angrily past the pair of us, but I didn't care. My thoughts were all on the familiar voice coming through the stranger's phone. "We're disappointed that you're not rising to the challenge, Aiden. We think that maybe your mother should have raised a braver boy. Thankfully, user Darkstar85 has generously agreed to go by 415 Meadowleaf Court and teach her a lesson." "Listen, whoever you are," I shouted into the phone, making a few of the shoppers surrounding me jump. "This isn't funny. I'm going to call the police, and when I find out who you are..." "You can go to the police if you want, Aiden, but that would ruin everyone's fun. And besides, by the time you talk them into it, it will already be too late for Kimmy. Come on, Aiden. Why don't you play along?" I fell silent. For all I knew, there was nobody waiting at my mother's house, and this sadist who spoke with my voice was just messing with me. But what if I was wrong? "What do you want me to do?" I sighed. "You see that man standing in front of you? The one whose phone you're holding? We'd like you to punch that confused expression right off his ugly face." The guy with the goatee blinked at me, wide-eyed and totally unsuspecting. I clenched my hand into a fist, then lowered it. No. I wasn't going to play their sick little game. I threw the guy's phone back at him and ran towards the restrooms. I remembered seeing some payphones back there. I would just have to hope that they still worked. The mall had seen better days, but the restroom hallway was particularly run down. Most of the fluorescent lights were flickering or burnt out, and there was a nasty brown puddle of something stagnating by the wall. The first payphone was covered with graffiti, and the second had been practically ripped right off the wall. But the third looked like it might still work. I jammed in some quarters and punched in my mom's number. "Honey?" My mom asked right away when she heard my voice. "Are you alright? You sound out of breath." Before I could explain, I heard something in the background on my mother's end of the line. A doorbell. "Ma, listen. Whatever you do, do not open that door." "Are you sure? They're knocking really hard. It must be important." "I don't have time to explain. Just get off the phone and call the police, okay?" I shouted. Glass shattered. Then the line went dead. A fat, scarred finger had pressed down on the receiver, cutting off my call. I turned to face the hulking figure who stood between me and escape. His head was shaved close, his teeth crooked, and beneath his fat there was a lot of muscle. A single diamond earring sparkled in his left ear. He cracked his knuckles at me and grinned. He wasn't alone. "Hey," I stammered. "That call was important." The big guy punched me in the stomach. His friends ran up behind me, shoved me to the ground, and held me there. They didn't speak, but one was taking a video of what was happening. The big guy sat on my chest and started smacking my face until I was seeing stars. I felt a tooth come loose. Are you right-handed or left-handed? The big guy asked. Right-handed. Why does that matter? I spat blood. We gotta make sure you can still answer a phone when we're done. He picked his foot up and stomped on my left hand. My finger snapped beneath his boot with a sickening popping sound, and I screamed louder than I ever had in my life. Hey, what's going on down there? A security guard stood at the top of the dingy hallway, pointing his flashlight toward us. A group of shoppers had clustered there to watch the one-sided fight. Did you upload the video? The big guy asked. His friend nodded. We don't get paid unless the video goes viral. Hey, you three, stop! The guard yelled, running toward us. The big guy sighed. By the time the pudgy, middle-aged guard got close enough to realize how outmatched he was, it was too late. They were on him. Clutching my broken hand, I limped out into the crowd. No one offered to help, but I did notice that a few people were recording. My head was reeling, and not just from my injuries. The whole situation was just too insane. Someone had stolen my name and voice, and they were paying people to torture me. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when I staggered out into the chilly parking lot and found that my car's tires had been slashed. That wasn't the worst of it either. Some instinct, some primal fear, made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. When I turned around, I saw 3 figures scanning the parking lot, searching for me. I didn't like to think about what they might have in mind for round 2. I ducked and crept along behind the cars until I reached the line of trees that marked the border of the mall parking lot. On the other side was a service road. It was a mostly abandoned strip of warehouses and boarded-up stores that ran along the highway. At the far end, I could see the glittering lights of a bus station. It might be my last chance to get home and get help. I was halfway down the service road before I regretted my decision. I had tried several more times to call the police, but my phone was blocked by more of those awful calls, proposing more sick tasks for me. You've made us angry, Aiden. If you don't want any more broken bones, you'll walk out onto that highway, take off your clothes, and start dancing. I hung up. The sound of the wind blowing through those desolate chain-link fences made me feel very alone. But I wasn't. Someone was following me. They walked faster when I walked faster, slowed down when I slowed down, and never let me out of their sight. From the way they held their phone at their waist, facing me, I felt sure that they were recording me. I had had enough. The stress of the whole nightmarish day had pushed me to a breaking point, and I don't think I could have stopped myself if I wanted to. I turned and charged. It was the last thing my stalker had expected, and when they dropped their phone and ran, I realized that I recognized the figure. It was the chubby guy from the toy store, the one who I'd noticed filming me. I shouted after him, but he was already gone, snagging his leg on barbed wire as he sprinted across a construction site. I didn't have the energy to pursue him, but I did have his phone. When I picked it up from the sidewalk, I saw my own face staring back at me from the cracked screen. The picture was one I'd never seen before, one that I didn't even know had been taken. Aiden Fisk, read the caption. What will he do next? A video clip played. A replay of everything that had happened so far. Grainy footage of me panicking in front of the ATM, being doused in hot chocolate, getting my arm broken, and walking nervously down the abandoned service road. Which meant they knew where I was. As the video ended, an app opened. An app that was all about me. There were polls about what should happen to me, what I should be made to do next, and what my punishment should be if I failed. The more gruesome options, it seemed, were always the most popular. In another section, users could use cryptocurrency to bet on what I would do, and track my location in real time. I was zooming in on my own location when a call came into the stranger's phone. Hello again, Aiden, my own voice said to me when I answered. Why are you doing this to me? I yelled into the receiver. "You're our entertainment, Aiden. You're famous. You should be grateful. Now, for your next task." I flung the phone away like it burned me. The lights of the bus station twinkled at the end of the service road, close yet far away at the same time. The road narrowed, becoming a one-lane alley between two construction sites, and the sidewalk disappeared. I hadn't seen any cars so far, but I could hear the rumbling of an engine approaching behind me. My shadow stretched out ahead, illuminated by a pair of rapidly closing-in headlights. I waved, trying to make my presence known, but the driver didn't stop. They didn't even slow down. A quick glance over my shoulder revealed an enormous truck. It occupied the entire road, and even if I had time to jump, there was nowhere to go. A low scream escaped my lips as the truck's front bumper nudged my lower back. I staggered, sure that I was done for, but the driver slowed to match my pace. They kept so close that I could feel the heat of the motor, egging me on, forcing me to run faster and faster. They could crush me beneath those huge tires anytime they felt like it, and they knew it. Was this my next punishment? I could imagine the app tracking my pace, people betting on how far I'd get before my legs or lungs gave out, and on which parts of me would shatter when I inevitably got run over. Up ahead, the road narrowed even more. Dead bushes and concrete islands had been placed in front of the bus station as someone's idea of landscaping. They didn't add much beauty to the place, but if I jumped into them, the truck wouldn't risk following me over the barrier. Probably. I still wasn't sure just how far these people would go for that sadistic app, but I had no choice but to take the risk. My feet left the asphalt. Branches cut into my arms and face as I crashed through to the other side, but the squeal of the truck's brakes behind me was music to my ears. The bus lot was well lit. A few older men stood in a circle, smoking, while a young woman took her fussy toddler for a walk around the parking lot. The driver idled behind me, probably thinking the same thing I was, that there were a lot more witnesses here than on the service road. By the time I got to my feet and looked back over my shoulder, the truck was just a pair of anonymous taillights disappearing into the night. I wiped my scraped palms on my jeans and walked towards the station lights, wondering how much more of this I could take. No one in the bus station seemed to be playing the app's twisted game. In fact, no one looked up at me at all when I walked across the grimy tile floor towards the schedule board. The station was about to close. The next bus to my neighborhood wasn't until 6:30 the next morning, and I had a nasty feeling that my followers would have caught up to me by then. My only option was to borrow someone's phone and hope that I could call for help before the app found me. Everyone I spoke to turned me down, and I could understand why. I was crazy-eyed and desperate, covered with scratches, and my broken hand had swollen to twice its normal size. I was about to give up when I felt a tap on my shoulder. The homeless man's clothes were in rags. His vomit-flecked gray beard hung down almost to his waist. The smell hit me like a wall, and it was hard to keep from gagging. He pressed something into my hand. A burner phone. "It's got one call left," he grunted. "A whole minute. Good luck, pal. You look like you need it even more than I do." He lurched back out into the dark, before I could even say thank you. Weighing the battered phone in my hand, I wondered who I should call. I doubted the police would get here in time. My mother wasn't answering, and my best friend Sam was out of town on business. That left Danny, my ex. She lived nearby, and besides, it was the only other number I knew by heart, even though I wished that I could have forgotten it. Danny's voice was huskier than I remembered, but she picked up right away. The first words out of her mouth were the last thing I would have expected. "Oh, thank God, I've been trying to get in touch with you for hours." She rushed into a story about how people had been calling and messaging her all day. People who were looking for me. She said it sounded like they wanted to hurt me. One even offered to pay her to seduce me and film the result. She had something to tell me, she said, but my minute was almost up. I had just enough time to tell her my location and beg her to come pick me up. There was a long silence. Before she could answer, the line went dead. I looked around. There was no longer anyone in the bus station to ask for a phone call. In fact, there was no longer anyone in the station at all. Metal shutters had been lowered over the ticket window and vending machine area. The waiting room was empty, apart from a discarded scarf that dangled sadly from a ripped-up seat. Somewhere in the depths of the station came a loud slam, and the flickering fluorescent lights began to go out one by one. Maybe it was just the standard closing procedure. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. But I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I approached the nearest glass door, then jumped back as a figure wearing a white plastic mask slammed their shoulder into the door. They pushed at the door like a rabid animal, trying to get at me. But it had already been locked when the station closed. Furious, the stranger took out a hammer and swung it into the glass. Fractures appeared, and I wasn't going to wait around for the door to shatter. I fled in the opposite direction, through the one remaining exit and out into the night. I think part of me already knew what I'd find waiting for me, and that's why I wasn't surprised by the small group of masked individuals waiting just beyond the streetlights. All of them held glowing phone screens in their hands, and a few held weapons as well. I spotted lengths of chain, a baseball bat, a gutting knife. As they started toward me, a car drifted into the empty parking lot, its tires squealing. Danny threw open the passenger side door and shouted at me to get in. She peeled out as I slammed the door shut. Her car was just as dirty as I remembered. Fast food bags on the floor, makeup kit crammed into the door tray, half-drunk coffee mugs in every cup holder. It had always struck me as funny that such a well-regarded scientist could be so disorderly. After an awkward silence as we merged onto the highway, Danny told me that it was over. Or at least, she hoped it was. As we sped through the night, she did her best to explain what she thought had happened. Danny's work, or at least as much of it as I understood, involved using artificial intelligence. When we were together, we had made a lot of jokes about Terminator and HAL 9000, but her research had never seemed sinister. At least, not until recently. Her most recent project was an AI that designed phone applications. She had built it to maximize profits and interaction, to identify what people wanted, and give it to them. To her horror, Danny realized that the AI had begun operating outside of its parameters, even accessing her personal files in its endless quest for a better product. She figured that was where it had found my image, voice, and other information. After analyzing trends across time, the AI had determined that there was nothing people enjoyed more than participating anonymously in the suffering of others. I was its first test subject, simply because it had found my data first. The AI, Danny added quickly, wasn't really to blame. It was people who had chosen to interact with it, download it, and make my life a living hell. It had done nothing more than fulfill its function, encouraging whatever behavior that got the most views and likes. Once Danny had realized what was happening, she had shut the AI down. Or tried to. It had apparently already spread itself to other networks, although spread wasn't the word that Danny used. The word she used was infected. As Danny dropped me off at home, she told me not to worry. Her organization would almost certainly take care of it, and I probably had nothing to worry about. But just in case, she asked me to spread the word. If you notice people staring at you or taking pictures of you in public, if you find yourself locked out of your accounts, or if you receive a barrage of strange messages, you might be next. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.